nobody sees your wins, do they really exist? Right? If no one sees your impact, or if your team doesn't feel the impact that they're making on a daily basis, they're not going to buy in, or they're not going to fund it. They're not going to give you the money that you need for innovations and investments. And I think that the way you tell the story about your functionality in procurement or supply chain or logistics, that's how you're really going to connect your function to enterprise growth and show how valuable you are to the organization. And I think the leaders who master that, I mean, they get budget, they get influence, they get invited to the bigger conversations. We all say we want supply chain at the table. Well, I think it all is going to start on how you're telling the story of supply chain within your organization.
Thank you so much for joining another edition of The Never-Ending Climb for Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. Today, great pleasure to be joined by Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. Sarah's founder, CEO of Let's Talk Supply Chain, best-selling Amazon author, and is a wonderful owner and bringing to this world a superpower for creating safe space for conversations in supply chain. And man, if the world doesn't need more of that.
So much for having me and for sharing your space with me today. I'm super excited to be here.
Likewise. This is going to be really good. And I think talking about supply chain, I mean, it's one of those things that literally helps drive the world. And when we're talking about this, sometimes a leader in supply chain and procurement ends up feeling like, man, they better reclaim this narrative because there's something going on and they need to reshape the narrative that is representing or being told about their part of the organization. And I know this is something almost every leader will have faced at some point in their career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know if you know this, and I was talking about this on my live show a couple of days ago, or maybe it was a couple of weeks ago, in the fact that storytelling as a job function has actually increased on LinkedIn as far as job openings.
Yeah.
Which I think is fascinating because think about it, right? People and organizations are actually job hunting and looking for people who can help tell stories, not only internally, but also externally as well. And we didn't see that before, right? I think it's only been around for a couple of years, in the fact that people are actually looking for that in their organizations, which has got to tell you something, right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when we think about procurement leaders, supply chain leaders, sometimes we let other departments tell the story. Maybe tell their story over our story. And I think it's really time for executive teams, professionals on procurement and supply chain teams to really own the narrative, right? Because I think too many times the executive team, the other departments, they're hearing about procurement. And they're only hearing about procurement when something's delayed, or logistics, right? Something's delayed, something's denied, something's over budget. And with all of that, you don't really have a narrative. You have a reputation problem.
Yep. Some people let the other person or let the other story happen because they're so busy doing all of the things, as opposed to remembering that one of the most important things is showing up well.
Yeah. And if you were to reclaim the narrative, let's focus on maybe procurement to start, right? What aren't you and what are you? Right? You're not the cost police, although some people think that you are.
Yeah.
But you are the risk managers. You're the margin protectors. You're the growth enablers. So when we use the words to really describe what it is that we do in a storytelling way, it's going to change the way we think and our teams think about our role within the organization. You can tell stories within the organization about how you help de-risk something, right? Before it even became a headline. Like, what are you doing in the background that people aren't seeing, but that's really important to the organization, right? The contract that you negotiated, that might have funded some technology project that maybe another department was able to do because you were able to save money through negotiating that contract.
Yeah.
Right? And so, like, I almost think that procurement doesn't necessarily need a rebrand. It just needs better internal PR, right? And no one's coming to do that for you. you kind of need to own it and do that for yourself and for your teams.
Yeah, there is nobody that will save you from the narrative of what other people feel. Because I mean,
Mm-hmm.
if we get into the what people feel and experience in customer service when they call up their provider of telephone services, they won't necessarily have universally great things to say. But these are
Right.
things where we can't control how they feel, but we can create some conditions that increase the probability that they feel good about it and help tell good stories about it. And if they are telling only part of a story that is unflattering, just turning the other cheek, if you will, is not always the best response. And I think
Mm-hmm.
the other piece of advice there is all of the things that we do that we need to make sure we highlight, right? When we do something great
Mm-hmm.
and we don't tell anyone, it might as well have never happened because a lot of people will never know
True.
that it was done and taken care of. And I think when we're all busy, and especially in supply chain where there's so much firefighting, so much dragged back down to the technical, this is where it can feel excruciating of, oh my God, how do I even have time to deal with this person that's saying bad things about our department or the job that we did or what they didn't get that they thought they needed? But if we don't, that snowballs and nobody wants to get caught in that avalanche.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times we want to use data, right? That's what we're
Yeah.
hearing, especially around all of the intelligence and the data that we have coming in and we have at our fingertips, right? So data, KPIs, data, what are we doing with that? How are we making more decisions? And I think data can really help in these sort of situations, but the stories are going to move the needle. They're going to move emotion. They're going to help others align with what you're doing in a way and in a language that they understand for them to really understand the impact that you're making on the organization.
Absolutely. And I think this is part of where storytelling and visibility
Mm-hmm.
really come back to front and center, right? And it's not just of, well, you need to comply because the policy says you need to comply.
Mm-hmm.
I often joke that every line in a policy has a story behind it. And often somebody thinks that line in the policy is dumb because they think whatever that story was that put that line there should never have happened in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Except that, there was that one time that Ted did this. And,
Right.
the HR policies have the same thing. If you would never imagine, at least, somebody like you or me would never imagine doing something like that. And then you find out that it happened and you go, they did what? And we
Yeah.
can't policy everything to death. But I think this combination of using stories to increase the visibility of the risks that we're protecting against and increase using stories to increase the visibility and the understanding of why asking for what you need early from the customers of supply chain is
Mm-hmm.
so important.
Yeah. But also, I think it's really important internally too. Like, how do we motivate our teams?
Yeah.
We're going to motivate them through the stories that we tell to showcase the importance and the impact that they're making. So not only, executives, right? They want to align with outcomes, they want to align with impact, they want to align with clarity. But also our internal teams want to do that as well. They want to know that when they show up in the morning to work and the work that they do throughout the day is making a difference. And the only way to really kind of do that and keep everybody motivated is through that storytelling of what they're doing and what the impact that it's making.
Yeah.
But I also think that we can't get lost in how long the stories are. Right? I think if you can't explain what you do in a boardroom in 60 seconds in a way that makes people lean in, you're going to lose the room, whether it's executives, whether it's your internal team, right? And I think visibility and storytelling go hand in hand, but sometimes we feel like visibility can be a little bit of vanity, right? Sometimes people shy away from storytelling because it's, like I said, vanity. But I think both of them together is really strategy. It's
Yeah.
kind of like what you said earlier. Like, if nobody sees your wins, do they really exist? Right? If no one sees your impact, or if your team doesn't feel the impact that they're making on a daily basis, they're not going to buy in, or they're not going to fund it. They're not going to give you the money that you need for innovations and investments.
Yeah.
And I think that the way you tell the story about your functionality in procurement or supply chain or logistics, that's how you're really going to connect your function to enterprise growth and show how valuable you are to the organization. And I think the leaders who master that, I mean, they get budget, they get influence, they get invited to the bigger conversations. We all say we want supply chain at the table. Well, I think it all is going to start on how you're telling the story of supply chain within your organization.
How you're supporting the outcomes, how you're
Hmm.
making the impact. And
Yeah.
the vanity one is one that I feel on a regular basis.
Hmm.
Frankly, I still can't believe that I show up on LinkedIn every week. If you'd asked me 10 years ago if I would be okay doing a podcast, I'd be like, hell no, I don't want to be on TV. Right? This kind of idea of that vanity
Hmm.
that can get in the way of our own success. And so finding ways, creating ways to set aside some of those limiting beliefs of nobody wants to hear about, nobody wants to hear from, and then creating the opportunity to go and share, to shine that light.
Yeah.
And it's very difficult for somebody to lead if they dim their own light before they even show up.
But think about what that does to your team. If your leader is dimming the light of not only themselves and what
Right?
the team does within that organization, you're not going to create motivation. You're not
No.
going to create teams that are going to want to stay.
Yeah. And I think that sense of letting the light shine also means being okay that sometimes people aren't going to agree with everything that came out.
Hmm.
And there's always the lead follow get out of the way component, but there's
Hmm.
the other element of it of asking for what you need to be successful. And
Hmm.
I know from talking to so many supply chain leaders that a big part of what set the winners apart from the average is that they ask for what they need to be successful. And that
Hmm.
means that they are out there telling the story of why they need to be involved early and often. And then the work that they do shifts towards the part that really matters. That pair two principle starts to take care of itself when
Yeah.
they're not spending as much time fighting fires. And I
Hmm.
think that influence, right? Sometimes supply chain procurement gets the Dr. No reputation, or we created this procurement curmudgeon character that, has this idea of needing to go take Tom Mills' soft skills course because they're out there. But when we get to show up and win friends and influence people from that perspective of supply chain, from making a better impact and partnering better with customers in the business and those suppliers that are and partners in the supply chain that make things happen.
Yeah.
That influence is so critical.
And I think one of the biggest mistakes that we make is that we think our titles automatically give us influence. And
Yes.
I'm letting that rest for a second because I'm not sure everybody will agree with me or even like that sentence. But I think it's right. I actually talk about this in my book, which is not about supply chain, by the way. But I talk about the power that we give away to labels and titles and identity. And we think that the titles actually just magically provide us with said influence or even other things. But what really does give us influence is trust. I think authority can force compliance, but
Yeah.
influence is going to inspire action. And so leadership without influence isn't inspiring anything, they're forcing something, which is going to lead to messiness, chaos, and trouble, right? And I think real leadership is being able to move people without pulling rank. It's building relationships before you need them. It's
Yeah.
understanding and having empathy and compassion for the CFO's pressure, the COO's metrics, the CEO's vision, and putting it in a language that everybody can understand. And so, for leadership skills, if we're talking about leadership skills and how we create sort of that safe space or that storytelling environment, I think it takes emotional intelligence, credibility, and consistency. And I think there's one hard truth that we really need to settle in on, and that's what I kind of said before, right? If you need your title to get something done, your leadership muscle just isn't strong enough yet. And I would highly recommend that you look inwards as a leader and figure out who you are showing up and who you want to be to make an impact.
That word "yet" so powerful. It's one of my favorite words.
Yeah.
Yet, right?
It's all a journey, right? We're all on the human experience. I don't get it perfect yesterday and then perfect again today. I absolutely do not. And nobody
Oh
does.
my goodness.
But we
Yeah.
expect it of ourselves and each other. And that's also where we get into a little bit of trouble.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I found myself thinking about one of my favorite questions that I like to reflect on is what are some things that I've learned, beliefs that I've left behind from, I'll call it me 10 years ago, me even a year ago. And I consider that part of the never ending climb, right? Of
Mhm.
build yourself to be a better person, a more effective person to go leave the world better than you found it. And,
Yeah.
be that better person for all of those people that you know, love, and care about. And when we bring that sort of a concept to seeking to deeply understand things that really matter, I love when leaders like you can share lessons that you've been able to put together that would serve you or serve leaders and aspiring leaders in supply chain, in procurement. If you were thinking about things that you wish you knew 10 years ago, what would you encourage somebody to think about?
That's such a big question. But I have a couple of lessons that I generally stick to and can really share. One of them is
Yeah.
consistency. Consistency will beat talent
Mm.
every single time, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
show up over and over again, even when no one is watching.
Yep.
So consistency is a really, 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 really big deal, especially when you're in media. I mean, you know this as well as I do, and I'm probably preaching to the choir, but people want to know that you're going to show up for them. They
Yeah.
want to know that you're going to show up consistently on the same day at the same time.
Yep.
I think, community is a really big deal these days. The goal isn't to talk at people, it's to build with them. So executive leadership is the same, right? Alignment is built through inclusion. I do a lot of advocacy work within the inclusion space, and I still think it's an important part of an organization. It's an important part of executive leadership, and it's an important part for everybody within the organization to feel that inclusion.
Yeah.
I think also authenticity scales, right? I think people can smell corporate spin from a mile away, whether it's in a podcast, whether it's in a boardroom. I think authenticity and vulnerability will win every single time.
Yep.
And I also think like your voice is your leverage. I mean, I didn't write a book about, finding my voice and the power of being heard without really believing that your voice is your leverage. I mean, if you don't use it, somebody else is going to define you.
Yeah.
And so that's why it's so important that we find our voice. And it's not that we're going to consistently have our voice every single day. In the book, I talk about how I lost my voice and built it back up again and lost it again and built it back up. That is the human experience. But having the voice, understand what we're using it for, understand how we want to show up and the impact we want to make is really, really such a big deal. And I think at the end of the day, like leadership and media are kind of the same game, right? Clarity, consistency, courage. And I think the people and the executives who are willing to step into what we talked about earlier, visibility, even when it's uncomfortable, stepping into
Yeah.
authenticity, vulnerability, those are the ones who are going to shape the narrative instead of just reacting to it.
And I think this sense of leaning into what really matters, right? Leaning into the
Mhm.
things that are authentic. There's
Yeah.
so much power in, a leader I really look up to was talking about Brene Brown in a
Okay.
conversation,
Uh-huh.
and that concept of the rumble and how powerful that is as a way to have that fact-based, objective conversation around some
Mhm.
of those things that need to be said and shared and aligned on. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's uncomfortable, but to the point of the consistency,
Hmm.
consistently being able to go and deal with those things that need
Yeah.
to be dealt with as
Yeah.
opposed to avoiding them. Wow, what an unlock. And I think that's part of what I was hearing as you were talking as a way of, repeating back part of what I think I heard and with some other reference points because part of the human experience is ow hot. I don't want to do that again. And
You'll never burn yourself again if you do it once. I mean, you
right.
might, but
Yeah. Yeah. And there's conversations with somebody that I hold dear, about learning the easy way or the hard way.
Hmm.
And sometimes youth appreciate the opportunity to learn the hard way, or maybe they're just wired to want to do that. I don't know if
I
you
mean,
can
listen,
imagine
I know
teenage
I have.
boys that maybe have a habit of wanting to do that. It's the same thing for all of us, but being able to learn vicariously through others and
Mhm.
help share that with more people in the world, put those lessons and opportunities and learnings out there. Sarah, I really appreciate what you've been able to share with the community today. Deeply appreciate your time.
Thank you.
When somebody's thinking about wanting to learn more or about how you can help them, what's
Mhm.
the best way for somebody to find you, and when should they be calling you?
Well, so let's talk supplychain.com. We also have a community called the Secret Society of Supply Chain, which is a free membership group, which is a great place to start because you get to meet, all the folks that are in the membership, and we share lots of content, and we do some office hours and things like that, some really fun things. On LinkedIn, it's Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. On Instagram, it's Sarah Barnes Humphrey. I do a lot on my stories, which is kind of fun. And then if anybody wants to look up the book, it's called I Buried Her in a French Press. And I promise if you put that into the search bar on Amazon, it's the only thing that will come up.
That is a wonderfully unique title. And as a coffee lover, I really appreciate that. Sarah, thank you so much for joining. And for all of you watching, this has been another edition of The Never Ending Climb for a Stronger Supply Chain and Procurement. Thanks so much. See you next week.
Thanks for having me.